Hey guys, it's Colleen again. For those of you that haven't watched one of my videos yet, I'm a senior at HWS. In this past semester, I was a coordinator for Mercury's at St. Francis St. Stephen's, and I actually would like to be an elementary school teacher. So I'm studying to get my certification in that. Right now, I am at home outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And a fun fact about me is I'm the youngest of three. I have an older brother and an older sister, but right now I'm the only child at home with my parents because both of my siblings, my sister's in New Jersey, my brother's in California. So today I want to do a little activity that some of you might recognize from America Reads, and that is making a comic strip. This was all of the students I've worked with in America Reads always love this one because you get to do a little coloring as well as writing, which I think is why it's such a favorite. Comic strips are great to do after reading a book, watching a movie, or just if you want an activity to do. If you're doing one after reading a book, you can pick one of your favorite scenes from the book and recreate it in a comic strip form. You can pick a scene from the book you didn't really like and adjust it. And when you make it into a comic strip, you can just choose some of the characters and create a whole new scene that wasn't even in the book, just using the book's characters. Or if you didn't just read a book, or even if you didn't, you should want to make a comic strip, you can just pick anything to create about it. It can be animals, it can be fictional, whatever you want. They're really great because they show you be very creative in what you're using and what occurs, what the plot is, what the setting is. So I'm going to show you how to set up comic strips in our careers. If you've done them, you're most likely have the template that we give you, and if you're at home, you probably don't have that template. I don't have that template at home, so I'm going to show you how to set one up and go over the components that I recommend being included in your comic strip. And then I actually just created a comic strip that was my homework assignment that my America Reads student that I'm still virtually tutoring assigned to me. So I'll show you what a finished one could look like. So first you need a piece of paper. You can use any paper. I'm going to use white printer paper because I don't want the lines of lined paper while I'm coloring, but if that's all you have, it doesn't matter. I have a lot of colored pencils at home, so that's what I use when I made mine, but if you only have pen markers or just pencils and pens, that's totally fine. It's all up to you. Comic strips are all up for your own creativity. So you get your piece of paper, and I always recommend doing at least 4 squares in your comic strip. You can obviously do more, but I like to do 4 at least because it gives you enough space to have somewhat of a little bit of a plot without it being too short and just like one sentence. But it also, on a single piece of paper, gives you enough space to really be creative in your drawing and what your characters are saying. So you can always create more than 4 squares on one piece of paper or just use multiple pieces of paper. So for me, I'm not always good at drawing a straight line right away or dividing my paper evenly. So when I create my 4 squares, I like to fold my paper first. So I take my piece of paper, I'm going to fold it in half one way, crease it, and then I'm going to fold it in half again. Increase it again. So I just like to do this because it helps me get 4 even squares, since I sometimes have trouble with that. And then when you open it back up, you have your creases, and now I like to draw a line across my creases so that I can see my squares divided. You can sometimes, for this, I like to do, I'll use like a thick black marker or something just so the line is very clear and your scenes don't get mixed together. And then I personally always like to number my squares so that we know the order that they go in case some people do them differently, you know which way to read them. I should do a little number in the top corner. You could do the bottom corner. So as you see, I use my folds, and on the folds, I drew a line across, so I have all 4 squares, and I should do a little number in the top corner. You could do bottom corner. You don't have to number them. That's just what I personally like to do. So now in each square, you will, whatever your idea is, however whatever you're going to write your comic strip about. In each square, you create a little part of the scene, and I recommend always doing at least 2 word bubbles or talking bubbles per square. You don't have to. Once again, they're all for your creativity, but I just think that allows you to have it's not too much going on, but it's also not nothing. So I always do at least 2 word bubbles per square, and then sometimes comic strips come with the word bubbles already created. I like to write my words and then create the word bubble around them, so that if what I want my character to say is long, you don't have to squish it in. You create the word bubble as big as you need it to be. So I think that's just helpful for me personally. And now you can also do, write words first, draw a bubble around. So if you've ever read like a comic strip in the newspaper or anything, sometimes a square won't have any words, which is fine. You're allowed to do that. But it'll have a little description at the bottom. So maybe the characters aren't talking, but you want to describe what's going on in the scene, like what they're thinking, or just to give the reader a little bit more backdrop. So you're totally welcome to do that. I don't always do that, but if you want to, you can. And so if you're going to do that, I would recommend just doing like blocking off a little space at the bottom, and then you have space to write it, and it doesn't interfere with your drawing. And then all I've written here is 2 word bubbles per square, and write words first, draw a bubble around. And so those are the main components that I recommend in a comic strip. You're free to do whatever you want with it. And then also for parents that you're watching, or kids that like to write a lot, because comic strips, you do write in them, but it is a lot of drawing, which is why kids really like them. I recommend whenever I would have an American Read student do it, I would have them write at least 2 sentences after the comic strip. Can be on the back piece of paper, on a separate piece of paper, just describing the scene, or writing just at least 2 sentences about the comic strip, what the characters are doing, what happened in it. It gives the reader of the comic strip more information, but it also allows you to practice your writing skills more, which is really important. So I just think comic strips are very fun to do, whether or not you've been reading a book or anything. You get to be creative in them. And so, as I said, I was assigned by my American Read student to create a comic strip for our next tutoring session. And we've been reading a lot of books about different types of animals. And so I let him go through one of his books on animals that we've been reading, and he chose an animal that he wanted me to create my comic strip about. So he chose a firefly. So that's all he told me. It had to be about fireflies. The rest was up to me. So I created I'm not the most artistic, but I created a little comic strip. So as you see my numbers, I did my black lines, and then I have 2 word bubbles. This one I have 3 per square. And so it's really not the most artistic, but for those of you that know fireflies, I have a little light. And so I did about how one firefly's light wouldn't work. And so as I talked about with making your word bubbles, after you write your words, you can see that my word bubbles are all different sizes. And that is because some of my times my characters wrote or were saying more. And so if I had made this size word bubble for everyone, this one, it wouldn't have been able to all fit. This one wouldn't have all fit. So it just makes it so you can fit your words without writing messily. I hope you enjoy writing comic strips. Please send them if you can. Bye.